Welcome. Once again, my name is Prisco, and welcome to the CBCCO Planetarium. Before we get started, I'm going to just go over your emergency exits. So in the unlikely event that we do have an emergency, I just want you guys to know where to go. And so that leftmost door is your emergency exit. And for some reason, if that door gets stuck, you can also use the entrance you guys used to come into the building. Once we're outside, however, we'll meet up over the soccer field, and that's going to be our safe area. And so our show's about an hour long. The first half is a simulation of our night sky. So we're gonna see what we can see in the night sky tonight, since we now finally have clearing. Winter's almost over, or now we're in spring. And we're also gonna fly into space, and we're taking a little detour to the moon, and we're gonna see what the astronauts got to see on Artemis in the last couple of days, which is pretty cool. I'll even show you some of the pictures that they took, and we'll kind of compare them, what we can see on our dome. Afterwards, we're going to fly off into intergalactic space. We're going to leave the galaxy just to see how big the universe actually is. And then afterwards, we're going to watch a movie about the scale of time and how we've measured time throughout history and its significance to us here as a civilization. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all the lights. It is going to get really dark in here, so please do not get up out of your seats until after the show, and we will get started. So once again, welcome today. So yesterday, as they came over around the moon, they actually were able to communicate with the International Space Station. So for the first time in history, two spaceships were talking to each other, which is pretty cool. All right, so this is tonight's sunset. Now, as much as we love sunsets, right? They're beautiful, they're romantic, all those good things. You guys came here for some outer space. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna fast forward time, and we are going to watch the sun set. Rotate our dome just a little bit, so try not to get too dizzy. Now we're going to be looking a little bit to the west tonight. Now, does anybody know what these drawings are called? Ooh, so these are our constellations. And there's 88 constellations in total. And we've used them throughout history for many things. We've used them to navigate, to figure out where we are. We've used them to tell stories, which is where these pictures come from. We've even used them to tell the months and the seasons. You see, as we go from month to month and season to season, our night sky will change. It doesn't stay the same. And this is because our Earth and our solar system are tilted. And they're tilted in a way that for us in the Northern Hemisphere, we can only see parts of our Milky Way throughout the year. But for those who live in the Southern Hemisphere, they can see the entirety of the Milky Way almost all year around. They can even see a couple of dwarf galaxies that we can't see, but we're going to visit those in a few moments. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all the constellations that we can see in the night sky. We're going to focus on just a few that we're going to look at today. The first is the constellation of Orion, the Hunter. The second is the constellation of Taurus, the Bull. And the third is the constellation of Triangulum, the Triangle. Now, the first two constellations make up part of what's known as the Winter Circle. These are a circle of stars and constellations that dominate the winter night sky. But as we get closer towards the end of spring, they're going to dip below the horizon. So right now, this is going to be sunset tonight, they're going to be on the horizon. And in about a month or so, they're going to be completely gone. And you won't see them again until you guys head back to school in the fall. Now instead, during the summer, you're actually going to see the center of our Milky Way galaxy, which we'll look at a little bit later. Now what I like about these constellations is that they're home to lots of bright stars. In fact, just to the left of Orion, we follow his belt over here, we find the brightest star in our night sky, Sirius. And Sirius is what's known as a supergiant. Supergiants are stars that can be 20 times more massive than our sun, or even larger. These are stars that tend to burn brighter, they're hotter, they tend to be or light blue color. And these are stars that, as a result of their size, will burn through their fuel quicker and live a shorter lifespan. For example, our sun's fairly moderate and will live to be about 10 billion years old. However, supergiants will burn through their fuel and only live to about 10 to 20 million years old, so much shorter lifespans. These are also the kinds of stars that at the end of their life cycle will go supernova. They'll create a massive explosion, extremely powerful. In fact, it'll be about the size, it'll emit the same amount of light as a billion suns. Now, if we go to the constellation of Orion, we actually find some stars that are on their way to that right now. So if we follow these three stars right here, this is Orion's belt, fairly easy to find in the night sky. If we follow this first star right here and go up, we find the star Betelgeuse. And Betelgeuse is a red supergiant. Red supergiants are red because they're much cooler. In fact, the hotter a star is, the bluer it is. The cooler a star is, the redder it is. And so Betelgeuse, because it's at the end of its life cycle, it's sort of cooling down and expanding, and eventually it will collapse and explode into a supernova. And that's estimated to happen in about 100,000 years. When that happens, it will create an explosion so bright we will be able to see it during the daytime. And then for us at night, it will be as bright as having a second full moon in our night sky. Now if we go below this, however, we can also see the beginnings of a star down in this bright spot right here. Now this bright spot looks bright because this was a picture that was taken that we put onto our dome. However, if you were looking at that spot in the night sky, you would see some twinkling, some shimmerings. What you're seeing is the center of the Orion Nebula. Nebula are clouds of dust and gas that will eventually turn into stars. And so this is already an area where stars are being formed, brand new stars in fact. Now just to the right of Orion, we find the constellation of Taurus, the bull. Now Taurus is home to two star clusters, two groups of stars. The first is the cluster Hyades, the Hyades cluster, and this is brightest star Aldebaran, which is also a red supergiant. But to the right, we find this bright blue object right here. This is the Pleiades, and the Pleiades is home to groups of blue supergiants traveling together through space at speeds of over 40 miles per second. And these are supergiants that are currently traveling through a giant dust cloud that reflects a large amount of their light back at Earth. And this allows us to see this object even from some of the most light polluted areas like Tri-Cities. In fact, if you're out in the evening sky or after sunset, just after sunset, pretty much from almost anywhere in Tri-Cities, you should be able to see some of the brightest stars from these groups right here. Now our last constellation is Triangulum. Now it's famous not because it has lots of bright stars. In fact, there's three stars that are kind of bright, but they're not really impressive. But it's what we can find in this constellation. So for example, it's one. We go down to the bottom right, and if we use this line here to kind of guide us this direction, we find this little bright spot. Now that little bright spot is the galaxy of Triangulum. It is our second closest neighbor at 3 million light years away. Now what's a light year? Well, Light is the fastest thing in our universe, and it travels at 186,000 miles per second. A light year is the distance light travels in 1 year. And so, what we're looking at is triangulum as it looked when the light left it 3 million years ago. In fact, we are always looking into the past when you look at the night sky. Just to the right of triangulum, we find our closest galactic neighbor, Andromeda. And Andromeda, at 2.5 million light years away, is also the furthest object you can see with your own eyes. If you're in a dark enough area, it is possible to see the center of this galaxy from a dark sky location, like Ritzville or Connell. Now, what's interesting about Andromeda is that it is getting closer to us. In fact, in the next 5 billion years, it might collide with and combine with the Milky Way galaxy. When that happens, we will eventually get a brand new galaxy called Milky-Way. NASA created an animation of what this might look like, and so we're going to condense 5 billion years into a minute, and we're going to see these two galaxies collide. Now, despite the hundreds of billions of stars between the two galaxies, the chances of a collision amongst the stars themselves is almost zero. And this is because our stars are just too far apart from each other. In fact, our closest star system is about 4 light years away, but even at that distance, you could fit thousands of our solar system between us and the nearest star.
How long would it take for both of those solar systems to combine, or galaxies to combine?
The entire collision itself is
Yeah.
going to take about 3 billion years from beginning to end.
Wow.
So it's super slow. So we, on our time scale, we will not notice it.
Sure.
But yes, over a galactic time scale, it feels like a car wreck to it. And so here we are. We're back at our evening sky. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to head off into space. And so, once again, if you do get dizzy, we do recommend covering your eyes, counting to 10, and that should help get rid of dizziness. And so here we go, off into space in 3, 2, 1. And now for our first stop, we're actually going to fly to the moon. Actually, I have to change the time. Let me change the time, because I had it set to today, but we're going to go back a couple days. There we go. Now we're going to go, I forget where the moon went. Let's fly to the moon. So this is the moon a couple days ago when Artemis passed around it. So they went around the moon. And let's see. Ooh, perfect. Okay. So to the right, you can even see the crescent Earth that they saw.
Oh, yeah.
I love how it goes the wrong way. You need to go. There you go. So this is what they would have seen on their approach. I'm going to rotate around real quick. And so they would have seen the front part of the moon, which is what we all see. We always see the same side of the moon, and the reason why that is, it's called tidally locked. That means it's close enough to the Earth that Earth's gravity affects its rotation in its orbit. And so its orbital speed and its rotation speed are almost exactly the same. And so, as a result of that, it is constantly facing the same side to Earth. So you've grown up your entire life seeing that one side with all the little blotches on it, those are actually lava basins, so ancient volcanic areas on the moon. But as Artemis would have passed the moon, they would have kind of rotated around it like this. And they would have gotten to see the parts that we don't get to see. Now, here, as we get towards the edge of its nighttime, so the darkness, this area is actually the first time that this would have been the first time that humans would have laid their eyes upon this part of the moon. And the reason why that is that this area was not visible during the Apollo missions. So during that time, it was currently covered in darkness. As Artemis passed around, however, they would have been able to see Earth sort of in a crescent phase. So Earth would have had a phase just like the moon does. Let's see if I can recreate this. And then, of course, as they passed around the moon, they would have been able to see the Earth set onto behind the moon itself. And now they had cameras, because this is the distance that they were from the moon. They needed to use like some cameras with a long focal length, and so that's the Earth's kind of setting behind the moon. Let's see if I can get it. And this is the picture that they got. And then zoomed out a little bit. So you can see how the Earth's on one side? It's because they've been almost upside down the entire trip. Because in space, there really is no up or down. Now, as they looped around the moon, they then would have seen a total solar eclipse. Now, here's something that most of you guys are probably going to be like, what? My whole life is a lie. The sun is not actually yellow. It is yellow because of our atmosphere, how it views. So whenever you see this up here, they do that just because you know the sun is being yellow. In fact, if I were to correctly make the sun what it looks like, in fact, you've even seen it in some of the videos, it is mostly white. So it looks more like this.
Is white?
And of course, it is much brighter because we don't have our atmosphere to filter it out. And so you've seen some of the videos that they've had on it, on the live stream. You would have look at towards the sun, this is white blob. And then of course, as they passed through behind the moon, they would have witnessed a total solar eclipse. Now, this is what that looked like on their images. Now, some of it is the eclipse from the sun, and some of it is actually dust, so some of it stretches further out. So there is dust in space that does get reflected by the sun. We can actually see that dust during March, mid-March and mid-September, either early in the evening or early in the morning. That's referred to as zodiacal light. And so basically it lines up in the night sky to some of the zodiacal constellations. And so you can see that during closer to the equinoxes, but that's some of it's the mix of that. But yeah. And unlike on Earth, where we've had totality or the full complete disappearance of the sun for about 4 minutes during a total solar eclipse, they had totality for over 45 minutes, which I'm totally jealous of. Now I'm going to turn the sun back to its normal state.
Does the sun look yellow because of the gases in the atmosphere?
Yes, our atmosphere, depending on the gases that you have, it will scatter different amounts of light, which is why at sunset, our sunsets look red, because it hits not only certain elements of like certain gases in the atmosphere, it also hits certain dust particles at the right angle. So because it's at an angle as well, it gets bent. And so that, because of all that light's being scattered, it scatters most of it exception of red. And so that angle, so it hits the Earth at, for example, the Earth at this angle, this is red, and then for everybody getting it face on is usually blue. Now, that red bleeds out into space, and whenever the moon passes through that, you get a lunar eclipse.
Oh,
which is why their lunar eclipses are red,
Gotcha.
which we just had. We actually will have another partial lunar eclipse later this year in August, and the observatory will be open for that. All right, so for our next stop, we're going to go a little bit further out to one of our nearby dwarf galaxies, known as the Large Magellanic Cloud. So let's see. Hopefully I don't get lost. I got already lost in space twice today. There you go. So I'm a little bit further than them. So these are the large and the small Magellanic Clouds. And these are dwarf galaxies. These are the remnants of galaxies that collided with the Milky Way billions of years ago. These are mostly visible from the southern hemisphere. However, places like Mexico, the Caribbean, they tend to see them for about 3 months out of the year. So now we just left our galaxy. We're about 160,000 light years from Earth. Now what's cool about this galaxy that is, despite its collision with the Milky Way, it actually is still producing stars. And we know this due to these red blobs that you see here. These red blobs are nebula, those clouds of dust and gas that form into stars. Now nebula are made out of a special gas called hydrogen, which is very common throughout space. And hydrogen, as it heats up during that star formation, will emit a red glow. And so we're looking for stuff in space to see if there's like stars forming anywhere. That's the telltale signature. Now, if you ever seen pictures of outer space, you'll notice, man, there's a lot of red out there. That's because hydrogen is very, very common in outer space. In fact, it is the most common element in the universe. And then, of course, here's our closest galactic neighbor, Andromeda. And Andromeda is about a little over twice the size of the Milky Way, at 240,000 light years across. This is a galaxy that loves colliding with other galaxies. In fact, it is estimated to have had up to 37 collisions in its lifetime. So we are not the first to collide with this galaxy, and nor will we be the last. Now its last 2 collisions, it basically robbed some galaxies of their spirals and left behind their centers. So we can even see them here. So it's M32 and M110. And you can even see some of the little remnants that are floating around it. So these are all those little remnants of other galaxies and some of the dwarf galaxies that it has collided with. And then our last galaxy is the galaxy of Triangulum. It's the little brother of the 3 major galaxies in our local group. It's about half the size of the Milky Way at 60,000 light years across. But despite being the little brother, this is a galaxy that produces stars at a faster rate than both the Milky Way and Andromeda. Now, it looks really empty out here in intergalactic space. Well, that's because our eyes can't see very far. But our telescopes and our satellites can see out to some of the farthest places in the universe. In fact, back in 1995, NASA sent out the Hubble Space Telescope to look at the emptiest and darkest portion of our night sky that we could find. And after 10 days, they came back with this picture. They found thousands upon thousands of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. In fact, if you were to get a dime and hold the dime up to the night sky, it would cover every galaxy in this image. If we were to apply the same idea to our dome, and I were to brighten and enhance all the galaxies for millions of light years in every direction, we would get something that looks like this. It is estimated that there's over 1 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. It is also estimated that a majority or part of the actual universe may not be visible to us, and it never will be. Because as our universe expands, it expands faster than light can travel to us, meaning we see less and less of the universe each day. Now this looks like a lot of galaxies, but in reality, this is simply a visual representation of what we've been able to map of the visible universe. And as a result, this makes up less than 5% of the visible universe.
Whoa, that's crazy.
And now we're going to head back to the Milky Way. We're going to do a hyperspace jump back to Earth.
It's just like a movie.
And a quick roller coaster ride back down to Pasco.
Going home.
Now this is the center of our Milky Way galaxy. This is a little bit around 4 o'clock in the morning. And so this is usually the best time to see the Milky Way as we get closer to summer. It's going to be more and more dominant in the night sky. But at the center of our Milky Way, right around here, there is a nebula called the Egret Nebula. And at its center, there is a stellar nursery, a place where stars are being born. And so for our last stop, we are going to visit the pillars of creation. Now the pillars of creation are about 5 light years tall. And aside from these towers of dust and gas, you'll notice there's these blobs that are sort of escaping from the sides. There's even one right here. Down here too. These blobs are known as globules. And what globules are baby solar systems. What you're seeing is the birth of brand new stars, planets, moons, and hopefully life. Now the first image here was taken back in 1995 by the Hubble Space Telescope. This second image was taken back in 2023 by the James Webb Telescope. And we anxiously wait a third image when they launch the Nancy Grace Roman Telescope in 2027. Now return home, safe and sound, so we get started on your film, Tales of a Time Traveler. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.